All right, I've got two after, and we've got a lot of stuff to cover today. And I'd really like to reserve plenty of time in today's session for some Q&A and group discussion. Today's the first webinar we're hosting in 2026. We participated in a couple. This is the first that we're hosting directly. So it's going to be a little bit of a look back at 2025, and most importantly, looking forward to what does 2026 kind of hold for us? What are the key trends? How do we accelerate Gen AI impact across industries? Frankly, across continents. We're working with clients in two or three continents these days. So let's go ahead and dig in. So we're going to start with the 5 reasons 2026 is going to be the year of Gen AI impact. As we dig into it, the first reason is, the tech is really maturing. Folks who are using Gen AI on a daily basis, I'm sure you're seeing this. The move to 5.2 in OpenAI introduced quite a lot of thinking capabilities and reasoning capabilities. Claude is getting better all the time. Llama open source solutions also are maturing, and they're becoming easier to work with. Two, agents are not only crossing the chasm, but they're becoming more scalable, more interoperable, more extensible. Intelligent orchestration is kind of the next step in that, is as we look at chains of agents and enterprise agentic platforms, thinking about how we orchestrate agents at scale with the right data, with the right guardrails, and with the right quality checks. Those capabilities and kind of building blocks are getting much more effective and are maturing really quickly. Fourth, I'm sure all of you guys are seeing this as well. Um, Solutions are becoming multimodal by design, not only supporting voice, but also visual kind of interaction. It's pretty cool that you can now, grab a picture of something, upload it, and get an answer to any questions you may have. That's very helpful for sales, for some, field support. There's a lot of kind of business implications of this, but the reality is, from audio to video to visual and movie-based solutions, we're seeing true multimodal convergence. And then the last kind of cool trend that I'm looking forward to exploring more is we're seeing model compression and the ability to host LLMs, even open source LLMs, on small devices, even as small as a phone. And so we're going to see embedded LLM capabilities in a lot of different contexts. And for your business clients, particularly manufacturing clients and groups that have a lot of supply chain issues or supply chain challenges that they need to solve for, this is a really big deal. Number two, scaling methods and enablers are maturing. We're into the third year of the Gen AI big push, and we're seeing much better kind of streamlined roadmaps and acceleration plans. The playbooks to embed these capabilities, scale them, do it securely, and do it quickly are becoming clearer. Three, that ability to take a traditional software engineer and really enable them to become a full stack AI engineer. There are a lot more resources out there. This is something we've spent the better part of a year working on, and I think we're going to see acceleration in terms of engineers crossing the chasm and producing, really scalable enterprise quality solutions. The code assistants are also getting much better. You have to be thoughtful. You have to be very deliberate about how you use them. But if you use them for prototyping, for environment configuration and design, if you use them obviously for documentation, test script development, really, really good at that. but getting better at like more complex architectural design. We just were doing some data model work recently, and used a code assistant to build out a fairly complex data model, and it did it really, really well. Definitely a big difference from, let's say, even 6 months ago. Next, organizations are starting to think more incrementally, and rather than just go after big bang solutions, they're thinking about how do we, develop, how do we deliver quick wins or deliver value every month along the journey. In our engagements, we actually challenge ourselves to deliver something of value literally every week as we engage with our customers. And then last but not least, organizations are spending more energy and and kind of maturing their capabilities of pulling integrated insights around AI and Gen AI, how it's performing, is it having a meaningful bottom line business impact? How are we managing our risks? Where do we have readiness gaps? And are we actually closing them at pace? And together, that's allowing leaders and organizations to be much more precise and much more focused in how they scale AI and Gen AI. The third key reason that 2026 is going to be a big year for impact is that early adopters have solved a number of the kind of foundational readiness gaps. Now, I put some caveats here. This is still a journey, and few organizations have like really cracked the code on this. But you're seeing a lot of organizations solve some foundational data readiness gaps. Most of the organizations that we work with are somewhere in the middle of their journey or still on the early side, but you are definitely seeing significant progress. Enterprise orchestration is better understood today. So a lot of organizations, particularly those that are a couple of years into their journey, have really figured out how to map the different resources in their organization, and then be able to parse user requests and real-time, Gen AI asks, navigate the different resources in their organization, and then pull those all the data and the different tools together to deliver complex solutions. Third, enterprise evaluation is getting better. Right now, a year ago, when we were talking about evaluation-driven development, we got a lot of kind of head scratching and folks not sure exactly what we were referring to. Evaluation is crossing the chasm. It's not there yet. And we're seeing, to be honest, a little bit of jankiness in terms of how organizations implement it. For groups that were really early and took a kind of federated scripting approach to evaluation, they've got a different problem today. They're actually needing to wind some of that back and rationalize their approach to evaluation. But for groups that are relatively early and kind of greenfield, the process of selecting an enterprise evaluation solution, implementing it, and getting value from it relatively quickly is much more straightforward than it was, again, even 6 months ago. The cost side of scaling Gen AI is also a lot clearer these days. I think more organizations are aware of the cost implications and that they need to be on top of them, and are doing a better job of pulling that data together and having a more fully loaded view of their Gen AI costs. And last but not least, I really wanted to touch on enterprise knowledge graphs. These are still pretty early. We have clients that are year 2, 3, even 4 years into knowledge graph work, and they're seeing real value from it. A lot of our other clients are just starting to kick the tires on it. But for groups that are looking to scale high quality, predictable, fast Gen AI solutioning, knowledge graphs need to play a big part in this. Good news is, a lot of organizations have made a lot of progress in this space. 4, secure and responsible AI is, there's a lot of work to do here. It's not simple, but the patterns are a lot clearer today. And I think the guardrails have solidified, and organizations I think are doing a better job of embedding secure AI and responsible AI really throughout their product development lifecycle. And it's not just a bolt-on at the end. That's one of the really important lessons, is it's embedded early in the cycle, and then really built in as a core part of scaling. And last but not least, kind of goes without saying, sponsors and stakeholders are looking for impact in 2026, not promises. So we're 3 years in at this point to our journey. There have been major investments in most organizations, or a lot of organizations, and there's been progress and lots of demos, and lots of interesting potential use cases. I think boards, investors, partners, and customers are all looking for, hey, let's translate this talk and let's translate promise into solutions that start really generating bottom line impact. And so the combination of those five, key trends, technology getting better, where this stuff is getting clearer, sponsors and stakeholders looking for impact, the patterns getting clearer, and early adopters making real progress, all are kind of leading to 2026 being a year of significant impact. That being said, we want to look back to 2025 and acknowledge, there were some key learnings, and we're really hoping that 2026, like organizations learn from what we saw in 2025, and don't make the same mistakes again. So there were three things that we wanted to highlight. The first is, hope is not a strategy, and everyone's heard that. But this is particularly true with GenAI, right? A lot of organizations, hosted hackathons. They brought in, vendor solutions. We hear about Copilot licenses being purchased en masse for the organization. And I think a lot of leaders look to kind of those kind of fragmented activities, and hope that they're a strategy, or hope that some results are the output of that work. And generally what we've seen is, without a really deliberate approach, without clarity and alignment around the role that AI and Gen AI should play in your business, and how you're going to kind of structurally enable that across your business, it's really tough to see real progress. The real reason for that is that until organizations solve the readiness gaps, they're likely to, like, we're seeing groups thrash kind of indefinitely, right? Until you solve for data readiness, and really solve for underlying data quality, availability, understandability, metadata strategy. Until you solve for your data, it's really difficult to make progress at any scale. Talent, same way, you really need to enable your folks to work in aligned ways, and develop really enterprise quality solutions. And that goes for a wide range of organizational capabilities. The third key learning, and we see this with clients all the time. We actually had a working session earlier today that was really focused on this, is you really need to match your Gen AI ambition with your Gen AI readiness, kind of the reality of your Gen AI readiness. We see a lot of clients wanting to jump to dynamic forecasting and AI recommendations engines, and full ERP, AI and Gen AI solutions, when they're really struggling with a lot of the foundational kind of basics of Gen AI and AI. So what we recommend is be really thoughtful on the front end about, like, understanding your readiness baseline and matching your use cases to your underlying readiness. And then as you solve for readiness gaps, you can you can introduce incrementally more ambitious, more impactful use cases. So this is a key watch out that we have with most of our clients as we first engage, is there's a little bit of kind of expectations management around which use cases we should start with and how do we deliver value in a reasonable time. And making sure that people are really clear about that is definitely a key to winning. So,
Jason, I got a question in the chat.
uh
What um what happens if I'm being pushed to do something really advanced right off the bat?
It's a really good question. So what we recommend is if you're being pushed to do something ambitious, do it in a lab environment, right? Create some synthetic data, create a scaled down version of it that kind of brings the capability to life, but isolates the number of production variables that you have to solve for, right? So if you can create a prototype that kind of is a proof of concept and demonstrates the value, and then walk leaders through, all right, to bring this to life and in a production environment at scale, these are the three, four, five, six things that we need to solve for, and then build a little bit of a roadmap. That's actually a really nice use case to get users to, or to get executives to invest in some of the foundational work that's needed. Sometimes you need to do that. You need to, answer the mail, answer the phone, so to speak, on what they're asking for, but then make it very clear what needs to be solved to do this in practice. Yeah, and I've been kind of walking through these first two sections. Any other questions? We'll have some Q&A in a bit, but did we have any other questions that we wanted to cover before we move into the next section?
Nope, I don't have any other open questions in the chat, but if people want to share any.
Yeah, feel free. The next thing, or just we wanted to take a minute. Like, we were laughing about this across our team about 2025 was a year of you lots of us heard about it. POC graveyards, POC zombies, lots and lots of Gen AI projects that almost worked, but never quite got there. And so, as a joke, we wanted to have a little bit of a moment of silence, remembering the hopes, the dreams, the hallucinations, the missed deadlines. All right, everyone had their fair share of these, and to be fair, that's what a proof of concept is for, right? As long as there were learnings along the way, and we translated those learnings into improved foundational readiness and capabilities, no problem. All right. There was a little too much of this in 2025. In 2026, we want to make sure that organizations are crossing the kind of value chasm and seeing real value, right? Seeing real impact to their business. All right. So we want to, enough with the kind of talking at you guys. We wanted to have a quick session to assess your keys to winning. So I'm going to pull up a screen. Our assessments and scans are now live on the Comparative Agility platform. If you could scan the QR code to your right, we are going to complete a Keys to Winning scan together. Give me 1 second, and I'm just going to pull this up. Unfortunately, I don't have this queued up. Give me 1 second. All right. So if folks could make their way to the keys to winning scan, super simple. This is just let's see, five questions from typical Likert scale, strongly disagree to agree. We have a clear and compelling vision to win with Gen AI for our business. And if you have any questions about what we mean by a clear and compelling vision, just scroll over or hover over the tooltip. And so when we're talking about a clear and compelling vision, it defines the role Gen AI will play in helping your organization deliver increased value and break away from from your competition. When done well, it serves as a North Star to guide priorities, align teams, and accelerate Gen AI adoption and scale across your business. We would hope we have a very strong vision to win at accelerated innovation. Not all of our clients do. So we'll just uh, submit that then. And by the way, feel free to add comments along the way. They're very helpful as we review the results and get some feedback from folks. Next question. And before I move on, Brian, can you just check? Could folks let us know in the chat whether or not you have access or any you're having any issues accessing the assessment or the scan? If you could, why don't you just type into the chat yes or no, whether you're able to access it or not.
There was one question about can we show the QR code again? I'm also sending the link
Yeah,
in. Yeah.
yeah, good call. Hold on one second. Let me pop that up. So here's the QR code, and we'll make sure to put that in the chat in our next sessions as well. So I'll give you just another second to access that. And then switch back to our regularly scheduled program, so to speak. All right, so your Gen AI strategy and plan. Our strategy and plan position us to win with Gen AI, and you'll hear this kind of wrapper around winning quite a lot, because the goal with Gen AI, or at least as we work with our clients, it's not just to adopt Gen AI. It's to adopt Gen AI and AI in a way that drives competitive advantage for your business. All right. So when we talk about a focused Gen AI strategy and acceleration plan, it connects your vision to measurable outcomes. It by prioritizing high impact initiatives, aligning stakeholders and sequencing efforts to accelerate time to value. That's a big part of what we focus on with our clients. When well-defined, they provide the structure to deliver high-impact results today, while remaining adaptable to emerging Gen AI opportunities and shifts in business priorities. So, it's not just a one and done strategy, but it really is a dynamic, kind of evergreen strategy and plan that we optimize at least every quarter. And I'm going to say I agree. We tend to have a pretty solid strategy and plan. There are areas where we're personally leaning in to improve as well. Third, productizing high impact Gen AI solutions. So we consistently turn high potential ideas into high impact Gen AI solutions. To be honest, this is what everyone's looking for. All right. All of the work that we do around strategy and vision and capabilities, it's all in support of creating solutions that add value for your business. And when we talk about around productizing, there's a lot of stuff going on here, right? So it reflects your organization's ability to identify, develop, and scale Gen AI solutions that deliver compelling business value. This includes understanding core customer needs. All right, we see a little bit of a resurgence of engineering-led solutioning today, falling in love with the tech a little bit. We want to make sure that we're keeping the customer's needs kind of at the forefront of everything that we're doing. Then validating technical feasibility and solution market fit before jumping in and spending a lot of development time. then developing and supporting GenAI solutions. That's where the majority of the work lands. Once you develop an awesome solution, you need to be able to enable adoption. We're seeing a lot of organizations treat this like a traditional software release, and in fact, there's a lot of education, a lot of enablement, a lot of kind of thinking through what the barriers to adoption are, and really making it easy for your clients to adopt your solutions. That's really important. And then, adopting data-driven GenAI product roadmaps. So I'm going to say in this case, I would agree, although we've got some areas of improvement here that we're working on continually. Number four, this is, to be honest, this is where we spend most of our time working with clients, ensuring you have the GenAI capabilities to win. And so the statement, we have the organizational capabilities to successfully adopt and scale GenAI across our business. Now, I encourage folks to be very thoughtful about this. It's not just that you have the latent capabilities, but you actually have the capabilities today to be successful at scaled GenAI solutioning. And that's very rarely the case today across industries. So, having the organizational capabilities to adopt and scale GenAI means your teams have the skills, structures, and support needed to integrate GenAI into core operations and scale its impact. This includes talent, secure and responsible AI, change management, particularly technical change management, cross-functional collaboration, and scalable operating models that turn GenAI into a sustainable advantage for your business. And I'm going to say not sure. For us, there are some areas in fact, I'm going to say disagree. There are a few areas like model fine-tuning, maybe hyper-personalization, where we've got some gaps that we're working to close this year. And last but not least, ensuring you have the integrated GenAI insights to win. This is an area where I think almost all of our clients are going to be leaning in 2026. So we have the data and insights we need to customize our GenAI journey and maximize our impact. And when we talk about maximizing our impact with insights, it's reflects your organization's ability to measure readiness, track adoption, and guide strategy with real-time intelligence. This includes KPIs, customer and product analytics, OKRs for strategy execution, key risk indicators, data and talent readiness, evaluation data, like big deal this year, and data and GenAI maturity insights that enable you to adapt quickly, focus investments, and continuously maximize your impact. I'm going to say, I'm going to agree for our organizations, although really not the case for most of our clients. So I'm going to submit this, and I will ask folks in the chat, does anybody need some additional time to complete the scan, or should we move on to the next section and we'll package the results? Let us know in the chat if anybody needs some additional time. Nope. Okay. So while we package those results, we're going to try something different today. So we're going to do a poll, and let's see. All right. So on the chat, can you guys let me know if you can see these results? And all right. If you could take a second, scan this QR code. We're all very QR code enabled these days. All right. I think it's going to ask you for your email. All right. So, first question. Let's go back to the Zoom. All right. What are the most significant blockers to scaling Gen AI in your business today? All right. Lack of a shared vision. We've got a couple of folks talking about strategy. So we have someone pointing to production issues. Um, got one person pointing to organizational capability gaps. Didn't see any integrated insight issues yet, but that's okay. And then, all right, so let's pause this then. Or actually,
Jason, I popped the link to the report into
okay,
Teams.
all right, appreciate that. All right, so I gotta admit, this is the first poll we've done, and I'm a little unclear how you move to the second question. And I was looking forward to seeing what people's responses were on the second question. Let me stop sharing. Well, I'm not sharing. Let me see if I can figure this out. Hmm. All right. We obviously need to do another dry run on the poll. Let's kind of take a second though and just get some perspectives from folks. Where you see blockers in your organization, if you could describe one or two of them, let's have a little bit of an interactive discussion around what people are seeing. Yeah, yeah. Pat noted that he answered the first question. That's on me. I just threw this in to give us a couple of minutes to package the findings, but we'll fix that for the next time we want to do a poll. So what types of, Brian, do we see anything in the chat about challenges or blockers people are seeing?
I don't. That's
Okay. So I'll
Oh
tell
wait, no, I take it back.
okay.
Um, I see, how to gather data for the AI. I
Mhm.
see privacy and legal requirements.
Yeah.
Um,
So the privacy and legal requirements not being clear. So Deborah, if you could, just give us a sense where, like, in where's that blocking or what type of impediments is that introducing? Is that making it difficult for end users, or you're seeing low end user adoption? Is it, internally, there's lack of clarity around what teams can do and can't do? Um, it'd be interesting to get a sense of how that's playing out for you. Kashif, I think you noticed or you mentioned the ability to gather data is a big blocker. And I also think that in addition to gathering the data, it's really understanding how to prepare it, how to enrich it, how to evaluate downstream quality and enriching it or dynamically updating the way that you approach your data enrichment practices. Deborah says she's in a medical company. Yeah. Yeah, my wife is the head of product for a healthcare IT organization. And the barriers in healthcare are just really pervasive, right? There's a burden of proof in the healthcare industry, frankly, that most organizations don't have to deal with in quite the same way. I think in general, it's getting incrementally better. Um, One of the issues that we hear a lot about are the issue of data rights, right? So as you're sharing, AI requires the ability to aggregate data from different sources and maybe track it over time. In a healthcare space, people want to understand financial data. They want to understand clinical data. They want to have access to administrative data and they want to be able to connect that to doctor ratings and things like that. And it's really hard to sort through data access rights in those environments to
Jason,
start bringing real intelligence. Yeah,
I don't know if you saw Deborah elaborated that the lack of legal guidance is
yeah,
making is really limiting their ability to move quickly.
yeah. What a bummer. So it'd be interesting in that case. It'd be interesting to get some time with the legal team and understand, is that lack of clarity on their side? Is it a lack of understanding relevant case law? And sometimes it's just a lack of or a reticence, to be honest, to provide very specific guidance until there's more case law defined. So that sounds like a pretty big blocker in your case. Moaz mentions, what's your take on cost management at scale and setting up on-prem infrastructure when third-party providers become extremely costly? It's a really good question. And it's a question that I think more organizations are looking at today than they were 6 months ago. Um, Now, I think there's a couple of different dimensions to this. One is a question of what are you optimizing for? So, uh, if you're looking at model selection and how do we leverage smaller scale, fit for purpose models for specific tasks across our Gen AI value chain, every client that we're working with is leaning in there. Um, a lot of organizations are starting to look at hosting open source LLMs, and there are obviously big advantages to that. You don't have to pay per LLM call, and on the front end, it looks quite attractive, right? The reality then is, you have to maintain, you have to have the expertise, and you have to be able to host. And so that discussion of, are we looking at online hosting in a private cloud, in which case you still have some expenses. Uh, B, do you host it on-prem? But then you need to start looking at GPU clusters and standing up the infrastructure to support it. So, it's a pretty complicated, I think it's a more complicated topic than people appreciated, 6 months ago or a year ago. But it's super important because this stuff is starting to get expensive as it scales. So it's a great question. All right, so let's head back and let's take a look at the keys to winning results. Let me pull this up. Bear with me 1 second. And we'll just see where folks are. Okay. So yeah, this looks fairly typical. It's interesting. Um, so what we're seeing here is, vision scores being a little bit low. I think I may have skewed some of these scores a little bit with my responses. Uh, Vision and strategy, being kind of moderately low, early stages. Productization being quite low. Capabilities being a little higher, and then insights. Again, actually, ironically, insights are insights, strategy, and vision all have about the same score. It's interesting when we see this pattern where productization is the lowest and the other capabilities or the other keys to winning are higher. Typically, what we've seen is that folks haven't dug into what good looks like on insights, or they're same with capabilities, because the product side is what's a little more obvious to folks, right? If they're stuck productizing solutions, or if there have been a lot of promises and there's been a lot of slippage, that's the area where it's the most visible. So oftentimes where we see this pattern, and we work with clients 6 months later, a lot of these other scores have gone down a little bit, and the productization scores have gone higher. So let's see. Uh, so when you take these scans, they do a good job of walking you through where your highest scores are, and where, if you do this at the team level, which we just did, it'll also give you a sense of where you're most aligned, where your lowest standard deviation is. It'll also prioritize, obviously where you have your lowest scores. Now, with a scan, not so important or not so impactful with only 5 questions. When you have, 22 questions in a large group, taking them, then, it gets more interesting. What I'd like to make sure to highlight is anytime you take a scan, make sure that a scan or assessment, make sure you click on the recommendations tab, because that's where a lot of kind of the context and the actionable insights happen. For our scans, when you review the recommendations, there's going to be some high level actionable recommendations that are a little generic. But what we take a look at the next steps, because one of these gives you access to the associated white paper. All right, so there are white papers for, we have a roadmap where we're looking to create 30 or 40 white papers this year. I think we have about 15 done today. So vision, strategy, keys to winning, capabilities, insights, secure AI, responsible AI. Those will all be available by clicking that link. You go through a registration process if you haven't registered for us, but make sure to register and you'll get access to the white paper. Then dig deeper with the full diagnostic assessment. And then obviously, if you'd like to schedule some time with us for a targeted one-on-one session, that's great. That's what we're looking for. All right. So as we wrap up here, I'm just going to skip over here. So as I mentioned on the front end, I appreciated the questions a couple of minutes ago. Those are awesome. I want to maybe spend the last 10 minutes on group discussion, QA. It's a little hard through chat, but I appreciate if you guys can submit some questions. There are 5 topics that we threw out as potential topics for today's Q&A session. You don't have to feel constrained to these, but if these are kind of areas that we're fielding lots of questions today, like what are trends that we're seeing and what do we see the implications being? How do organizations, what are they doing to accelerate their readiness? If readiness is really the key to getting out of the kind of POC graveyard. What are organizations doing? Which ones are they prioritizing in what order? We get lots of questions about how do organizations enable engineers to move from traditional software development to really highly effective full stack AI engineering. We are spending lots of energy these days developing capability scaling playbooks. So happy to field any questions. And then we usually get a lot of questions about what are some cool applied use cases that we're either working on directly or we're seeing organizations work on. So let me check the Q&A, the chat. Hey, Brian, do we have any questions to start with?
No, we don't have any open questions right now, Jason.
All right, so we got about 10 more minutes, and here's a great chance to, pick Brian's brain a little bit around responsible AI, readiness, any topics that are of interest, or maybe even offer, something that you guys are seeing, that you're particularly interested in. We'd love to have a little bit of a, kind of interactive, discussion at the end of all of our webinars. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second. All right, looks like, yeah, so the capability scaling playbooks, are, Marty was asking, are they kind of generic guidance, or, how do those work? And it's a great question. The One of the things that we've been focusing on is taking the patterns that we're seeing across our clients and turning them into kind of scalable patterns, right? Or scalable action plans with enablement resources around them. So for responsible AI, as an example, we've been building out our RAI scaling playbook that then maps to a series of workshops. In each workshop, participants, explore kind of best practices. So, what does ethics, mean in this space? What are best practices around governance? What are best practices around bias mitigation, model control, ownership, target operating models for responsible AI at scale? And in each session, we go through and complete a different kind of section of the playbook that then translates into your draft target operating model for the organization. And so what we're looking to do is really define the range of decisions and the trade-offs that every organization needs to make, very deliberately, and then make it really easy to move through that at pace in a facilitated way. So awesome question, Marty. So there's a lot of structure, but the capability scaling blueprints are all about making recommendations around best practices so we can move quickly. In those areas where explicit trade-offs and decisions are needed, we can make them quickly, but in an informed way. Kashif, how can we limit AI to avoid hallucinating? And especially in healthcare, how can we limit AI to not suggest medicines or anything which is not allowed? Yeah, it's a really good question. So let's talk about hallucination. So hallucination, we were joking about this yesterday. Brian, what was the joke about your data?
Um,
I think it was like, your AI is dumb and it's your data's
oh,
fault,
right.
right?
If
And
your
so,
AI is dumb, it's your data's fault.
right, hallucination is mostly about data readiness challenges and lack of specificity around embedding strategies. One of the kind of approaches that we're seeing is moving away from semantic search in high sensitivity areas like this, and translating the user query into a specific metadata driven call to structured data, right? So if there is specific kind of protocols, there are specific patterns that you see. If you can use the LLM to drive like an inference, a recommendation, hey, we believe this is the path, and then the LLM calls a specific protocol that is clearly defined and it can't modify, right? So being really clear about where the LLM has creative license in the inference process and where it's pulling very specific data that it can't modify is really, really important in areas like this. The second part of this is just evaluation rigor. right? And so if you can go through and identify your core use cases, have a really good grounded golden source data set with specific protocol responses, and then make sure that you're really evaluating it rigorously prior to releasing it, testing that throughout the gating processes, and continuing to to sample and evaluate production responses. Like it's kind of a combination, I think, of making sure your data is really clear and highly enriched in a way that optimizes the quality of your responses. Uh, to being really clear around where the LLM has license to modify and actually generate content and where it's doing a search for predefined protocols. And then three, evaluation really is the key there. Any other hot topics, questions? We touched on costs, touched on hallucination a little bit, touched on legal barriers. Um, I think the question, one of the questions we've been kicking around recently is, what's the future of an AI team look like, right? And what's a product organization look like in an AI context? So I think that's another area where we're going to be leaning in, kind of releasing some thought leadership in the next 2 to 3 months around the builder trend. As we empower, individuals and teams get smaller in this space with better code assistance and more full stack capabilities. You can now have a kind of general platform manager across a lot of these solutions. They still have product facing and customer facing responsibilities. You have a platform architect, probably a senior BA that's looking at the user experience and user requirements. But then, pretty quickly you can move to smaller component teams and even 2 and 3 person squads that own either a component or individual agents or chained agents on the platform. And so one of the things we're quite interested in looking at is, how do we help, engineers and product teams make that transition from traditional software? And it's not really a transition, it's really an evolution. They still, have traditional software development they're doing every day, but that they master these new Gen AI engineering capabilities and competencies. And then looking at, given these new capabilities and the way that platforms are evolving, and the new kind of productivity potential, like what do product organizations look like today? What are they likely going to look like in, let's say, 12 to 18 months? And what might they look like 2, 3, 4 years from now? One of the key things that we're seeing is that's rarely a kind of one jump journey. Typically starts today with your current structure, enabling and helping people kind of master the kind of base competencies, and then kind of taking an incremental approach to this flatter, more kind of federated platform-based strategy. So look, we've only got 3 or 4 minutes left in the hour. Happy to field any other questions. If not, I'm happy to give folks a couple of minutes back in the lunch hour. So thank you everyone for joining today. This was a fun, interactive discussion. We're going to bring more interactivity into each of these sessions as we roll out kind of bi-weekly webinars. So we'll continue doing assessments and scans. I'll figure out the polling a little bit better. That was my first time doing a Zoom poll. I need some remediation training on that one. And the more you guys can bring questions to these sessions that we can begin sharing as a community, I think the better. So thank you for your time today, and we look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.